Ethan had never intended to enter a royal arena. He was just an engineer, someone who fixed machines and relays on distant colonies, someone who preferred cables and circuits over crowds and ceremonies. Yet here he was, standing in the middle of a spacefaring city that shimmered with towers of crystal and steel, surrounded by thousands of eyes, all alien, staring at him as if he had walked into a sacrilege. The sun of Leora's planet hung low, painting the arena in gold and purple. Alien spectators filled the tiered seats, their eyes glinting with curiosity and amusement. Some whispered to each other in languages Ethan could not understand. He could only pick up the odd hum or the clicking of mandibles, and at the center, on a raised platform, was the box. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Not large, only about a meter wide, yet its surface shimmered with layers of metal and crystal. The outer layer seemed alive, pulsing with faint energy. Ethan crouched slightly to inspect the faint lines etched into the surface. To him it looked like a puzzle, a mechanism rather than a weapon. To the audience it was a sacred artifact, a test no living being had ever passed. Queen Leora sat high above on a throne that seemed carved from a single star metal crystal. She was everything the story said, tall, regal, and terrifyingly beautiful. Her eyes glimmered like molten gold and her hair, long and black, shimmered like liquid night. She had laughed at countless suitors before, each believing themselves clever or strong and each failing spectacularly. But there was something different about this human. Something almost bold in his ignorance. Ethan didn't know what he was doing. He had no idea that by stepping into the arena, he was participating in a centuries-old challenge that demanded immense strength, intelligence, and patience. He simply saw a strange object that called to him like a puzzle waiting to be solved. He approached cautiously, trying not to touch anything directly. His human instincts told him to observe first. He circled the box slowly, studying the faint glow of its seams. The crowd began to murmur louder, a rising tide of shock and outrage. A human here? Attempting what centuries of powerful aliens had failed. One of the announcers, a tall being with wings and translucent skin, began to shout in a booming voice. Ethan didn't understand the words, but the tone carried warning and disbelief. He ignored it, focusing entirely on the box. The first thing he noticed was that the surface was not solid. It had layers, each vibrating slightly as if responding to his presence. He knelt and ran his fingers along a thin seam, careful not to trigger any unknown trap. To his surprise, the metal responded to his touch, almost like it recognized him as a living being and not a threat. Ethan smiled slightly. Engineers always loved a challenge. He pulled out a small multi-tool from his belt, carefully examining the box's surface. Tiny plates, almost invisible, shifted under his gaze. He realized this wasn't about force, it was about understanding. "Don't touch it," someone shouted in a language he didn't understand. Ethan only looked up briefly. The crowd was reacting with shock, some stepping back as if they were witnessing a crime. Queen Leora's golden eyes narrowed. She had expected him to fail spectacularly. Every suitor had tried to brute force the box, smashing it or using the most advanced technologies to pry it open. None had succeeded. But this human, he wasn't aggressive. He was calm. He was studying. Minutes passed, but to Ethan it felt like hours. He traced the faint lines, watched the subtle shifts in the box's energy, and then he noticed it. A pattern in the vibrations. Pressure points. Heat sensors. A lock mechanism that required a certain rhythm to disengage. He smiled. "All right, let's see." Ethan adjusted his grip slightly, pressing on a tiny plate, then another. He wasn't trying to force the box open. He was listening. The faint clicks, the subtle hums, they were communicating. Not words, not threats, just instructions. He tilted the box slightly, adjusting for pressure, then rotated a small dial hidden under a seam. The box's glow pulsed in response. Ethan held his breath. The crowd was holding theirs too, though many didn't understand why, and then, click. The box shifted slightly, a subtle vibration running along its surface. Ethan carefully lifted the top, revealing an interior that glimmered with a soft golden light. The box was open, silence fell. The arena froze. Thousands of aliens stared at him, mouths open, eyes wide. No one had ever opened the box, no one. And here was a human, a being their kind had dismissed as weak and primitive, solving what centuries of alien intellects could not. Ethan blinked and looked down at the open box. He didn't feel triumphant or proud. He was simply curious. Inside there was a small device, a delicate mechanism that seemed almost like a key to some larger puzzle he didn't yet understand. But the challenge was complete. Queen Leora rose slowly, her eyes fixed on him. The golden light of the setting sun caught her features, highlighting the shock and awe in her gaze. She had expected arrogance, perhaps fear. Instead, she saw calm, observation, intelligence, respect. The announcer's voice rang out again, louder this time, full of disbelief. Ethan still didn't understand the words, but he knew the meaning. He had won. The rules of the challenge were clear. Anyone who opened the box had won the Queen's hand. Even she could not deny it, human. Leora's voice echoed across the arena, soft but commanding. Do you understand what you have just done? Ethan looked up, blinking at her. I think I just opened a box, he said, shrugging. It was jammed. Leora's eyes widened slightly. Her lips curved in a smile. Amusement mixed with something else, something she hadn't expected to feel in centuries. Curiosity? Admiration? Perhaps even desire. The crowd erupted in shocked murmurs. Some cheered, some gasped. Aliens who had bet their fortunes on their own champions now looked uncertain. The challenge had ended in a way no one could have predicted. Ethan, still confused, glanced around. Wait, what happens now? He asked. He had no idea that the simplest question he could ask would send shockwaves through the entire galaxy. You, Leora began, stepping down from her throne, her robes flowing like liquid night around her. You have won. By the rules of this realm, you are mine to claim. Ethan's eyes widened. Claim? I didn't even try to win anything. She stopped a few meters away, studying him intently. That does not matter. You have fulfilled the conditions. The law of the arena binds me. And yet, her voice softened slightly. I'm curious about you, human. You approach life in a way none of my suitors ever have. You do not fight blindly. You do not seek glory. You understand. Ethan blinked. Understand what? Leora smiled faintly, almost wistfully. Everything. The crowd continued to murmur, their noise a distant echo to Ethan. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. One human standing in an alien arena had just rewritten tradition. He hadn't expected this. He didn't even know he had a choice. You will marry me, Leora said finally, her voice calm but firm. By my own decree and by the law of this realm. Ethan took a step back, raising his hands in protest. Wait, marry you? I don't even know you. And I'm not from here. None of that matters, Leora replied. You have shown courage, intelligence, and respect. That is worth more than strength or wealth in my eyes. Ethan hesitated, feeling the weight of her gaze. It was not commanding. It was not threatening. It was thoughtful, curious, almost kind. He realized that the Queen did not expect him to be afraid. In fact, she seemed impressed. He shook his head, laughing nervously. I think you might be overestimating me. I just fixed a box. Leora's laugh was low, musical, and it made a strange warmth spread through the arena. Perhaps. But that box represents more than a simple lock. It represents pride, power, and centuries of failure, and you have succeeded where no one else could. Ethan swallowed. The enormity of the situation began to sink in. Across the galaxy, warriors, engineers, and kings had tried and failed. And now, for reasons he could not fully comprehend, he had succeeded. Come, Leora said, extending her hand. Let us speak. There is much you do not know about this realm, and much I wish to learn about you. Ethan hesitated, then slowly stepped forward. The arena's noise faded into the background. Thousands of eyes watched, but he felt only the strange pull of curiosity, of challenge, and perhaps of connection. The box remained open behind him, a silent witness to history, and somewhere deep inside, Ethan felt the first stirrings of a story he never expected to be part of. A story of courage, intellect, and the unexpected ways humans could astonish even the most advanced civilizations. And Queen Leora. She felt it too. The first flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in centuries. Respect, curiosity, and perhaps the first hint of love for the human who had dared to open her box. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the arena. The moment had passed, but the consequences were only just beginning. The news spread faster than wildfire across the galaxy. A human had opened the Queen's box. Not just any human, a quiet, unassuming engineer from a remote human colony. For centuries, alien empires had watched the trials, assumed the rules, and dismissed humans as weak. Now all that certainty was gone. Queen Leora's throne room was alive with tension. Ambassadors, nobles, and generals crowded in, their voices rising in outrage. "This cannot be," one declared, his limbs waving as if to summon storms. "A human? A mere human has done what the greatest champions of the galaxy could not?" Ethan stood beside the queen, awkward and unsure. He hadn't sought attention, and yet here he was, the center of galactic scandal. He rubbed the back of his neck, trying not to look at the glowing eyes of the crowd around him. Leora's expression was calm, regal, and unreadable. She had expected chaos, threats, perhaps even anger from Ethan, but instead he was quietly human, curious, polite, and surprisingly brave. She studied him carefully, thinking that perhaps this human was more remarkable than any of her ancestors had imagined. "You don't understand," Ethan began, his voice small in the vast room. "I didn't come here to win anything. I was just fixing a communication relay nearby. I didn't even know what the challenge was." Leora's golden eyes softened slightly. "You underestimate yourself. You saw what no one else could. That is why you succeeded. Not with strength, not with pride, but with understanding. That word echoed through Ethan's mind. It wasn't what he expected. But perhaps that was why the queen chose him. Not because he was human, but because he did not try to impress her. He had done what needed to be done. Yet the galaxy did not see it that way. Word had reached the warlords, the council, and rival nations. Some considered the marriage illegal. Others saw it as a challenge to their authority. Some even whispered of war. One such warlord, Craven, sent a formal challenge. He was a massive alien, known for crushing opponents in combat. His demand was clear. If Ethan could not defeat him in the trial of strength and wit, the marriage would be nullified. Craven wanted to show that humans were weak, that their reputation as fragile beings was correct. Ethan froze when he received the challenge. He was not a warrior. He had never wielded a weapon outside of engineering tools. And yet the queen did not flinch. She smiled faintly and said, "Do not fear, human. Strength is not always measured by muscle. Your mind is sharper than steel." Ethan swallowed hard. He had no choice. He had already opened the box, and now he had to face the consequences. He glanced at Leora. She was calm, radiant, and entirely unwavering. Somehow that steadiness gave him courage. The arena for the trial was massive, unlike anything on human worlds. Craven arrived, towering over everyone. His scales shimmered like molten metal, and his claws looked capable of tearing through steel. The crowd gasped. Ethan could feel the weight of history pressing down on him. Every eye watched, expecting the human to fail. The trial began. Craven rushed forward, claws swinging. Humans were fast, but not fast enough to dodge such a powerful strike. Ethan barely had time to react. He dodged instinctively, relying on timing and observation rather than brute strength. Craven sneered. "You cannot win, human," he roared. "I am the strongest alive." Ethan shook his head. "Strength is not always about power," he muttered. He spotted the machinery surrounding the arena, strange devices, energy plates, and pulsing conduits. To a fighter, they were decoration. To an engineer, they were tools. Craven lunged again. Ethan sidestepped, guiding the warlord toward a series of pressure plates. He ducked behind a barrier just as Craven's weight triggered a trap that sent a net of energy upward, harmlessly but securely restraining him. The crowd gasped in shock. Ethan's mind worked quickly. He could not fight Craven head-on, but he could use the arena itself. He triggered levers, redirected energy fields, and subtly manipulated the mechanisms to immobilize the massive alien. Craven struggled, claws thrashing, but he could not break free. The crowd went silent. None of them expected a human to overcome a warlord in this way. Humans were always considered weak, fragile, and unfit for combat. Yet here was proof that intelligence, strategy, and calm thinking could triumph where sheer strength failed. Leora's eyes gleamed with admiration. "You have done what none could," she whispered, her voice almost lost in the roar of astonishment from the audience. "You have shown what it means to be human. Not weak, not small, but clever, patient, and brave." Ethan took a deep breath. He was trembling slightly, but he smiled. I just used what I knew," he said, shrugging. "I didn't want anyone to get hurt." That moment shifted everything. Aliens who had laughed at the humans who had assumed they were inferior now looked at Ethan with respect, awe, and a hint of fear. He had proven that humanity could surprise even the most advanced civilizations. Craven, trapped and humiliated, bellowed, "This cannot stand."
You cheated!
"You did not see the box open?" Ethan asked calmly. "Or maybe you just assumed humans cannot understand things they have never seen before." The crowd erupted in cheers and astonished murmurs. For the first time, a human was not just participating in galactic events, he was changing them. Leora stepped forward, walking to Ethan. She reached out and touched his shoulder lightly. "You have honored the challenge," she said. "And you have honored me." Ethan looked at her, unsure what to say. I still don't understand. You're the queen, why me?" She smiled, a slow, radiant smile. "Because you are different. You do not seek power. You do not seek glory. You simply are, and that is rare." The crowd continued to cheer, but the moment between them felt private, almost sacred. Ethan realized that for all the spectacle, all the challenges and rules, it was their connection that mattered. He did not understand all of her ways, her history, or her people, but he understood her in that moment. The following days were tense. Alien officials tried to overturn the marriage. Some sent spies, others tried to discredit Ethan, and a few even tried to provoke him into combat. Each time, Leora stood firmly by his side, defending him with authority and grace. She made it clear, the human had earned her respect and no one could take that away. Ethan learned quickly. He adapted to customs, learned the basics of her language, and studied the politics of the court. He was careful, observant, and humble, qualities that won over even the most skeptical nobles. Slowly, the fear and disdain began to fade, replaced by curiosity and eventually admiration. One evening, as they walked through the palace gardens, Leora spoke softly. "You have changed my world, human. Not by force, but by thought, by action, by courage. You have shown what your species is capable of." Ethan looked at the glowing alien flowers glowing softly in the night. "I never wanted to change anything, I just solved a box." She laughed, a musical sound that made the air shimmer. "And in doing so, you changed everything. Not just for me, but for all of them. They will never see humans the same way again." He turned to her, feeling a strange mixture of awe and warmth. "And what about you? Will you ever see me as more than just the human who opened your box?" Leora's eyes softened. "Perhaps I already do. I saw something in you that no one else has shown me in centuries. Calm, patience, intelligence, bravery. You may be human, but you are remarkable." Ethan smiled, feeling a strange sense of peace. For the first time, he understood that this union, unexpected, improbable, was not just about tradition or law. It was about respect, understanding, and choice. Months passed. The galaxy adjusted to the idea of a human married to Queen Leora. Some continued to grumble, but most began to accept it. Alliances shifted, rivalries softened, and a new respect for humanity grew across the stars. Ethan and Leora faced challenges together, navigating court intrigue, alien diplomacy, and the occasional jealous suitor. But through it all, they learned from each other, grew stronger together, and slowly love began to bloom. Not the loud, fiery kind of legend, but quiet, steady, and deeply human. One night, standing on the balcony overlooking the alien city, Leora turned to Ethan. "You changed my life," she said softly. He smiled, taking her hand. "And you changed mine. I never expected to be here, or married to a queen." She laughed softly. "You never expected anything. And yet you succeeded. That is why I admire you, human. That is why I chose you." Ethan squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of her touch. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'll face it with you." Leora's smile deepened. "Then let us face it together. Not as ruler and subject, but as partners, as equals, as humans and aliens bound by choice, not by challenge." The stars above shimmered in approval, or perhaps it was just the city lights. Ethan didn't care. For the first time, he felt like he belonged, not just on this world, but in a place where humans could be seen as more than weak, more than fragile. A place where they could inspire, astonish, and even conquer. Not with weapons, but with intelligence, courage, and heart. And Queen Leora, who had never expected to be challenged by a human mind rather than a warrior's blade, found herself smiling in a way she hadn't in centuries. She had chosen not just a husband, but a partner. One who saw her as more than a queen. One who understood her. The galaxy would never be the same again. And neither would they.